I didn't want that identity. And it plagued me right up until I was 28. I never knew of anyone to openly judge anyone that was gay, but I didn't want to be. I was in a very desperate situation at that point of my life, and I just had no hope. It was like I was just going to exist until I died, because life just seemed to have no meaning or purpose. My name is Lucy, and I'm from Australia. Home life was very dysfunctional growing up. My dad was a really angry guy, and my mum was quiet, and she was, how do I say this? She was sort of the barrier between us and our dad, I guess. She was sort of the one who would try and diffuse the situation. And the only way to diffuse the situation was to not argue back with my dad, because he was looking for a fight. I wasn't bullied so much by my father, but my sister, if somebody was to ask me what my most vivid memory as a child was, that was the first thing that come to my mind, was just remembering my dad one time just yelling so much at my sister, and she ran to her room, and my dad chasing her down, yelling at her, and her slamming the door, and him at the door yelling, and just the thought that my sister's going to kill herself one day, that come to my mind. And my brother, he could never do anything right in my dad's eyes, and he tried to earn my dad's love, and just nothing he ever done was good enough, and he was always in trouble with my dad as well. We hid behind our mum a lot, and she was certainly our rock as children. If my mum wasn't home when we were children, then we would really walk on eggshells around the house. If we ate when we come home from school before my mum got home, my dad would be angry. We weren't allowed to eat. If there was any signs that we had eaten, then we would get told off. If he got home and the windows weren't open in the house so fresh air could blow through, then he would be really angry and would yell at us. So life was not happy when mum wasn't around. If mum was around, then she was the punching bag, I suppose. We felt safer with mum. So I became, I don't know, really vindictive, I suppose. I wanted to hurt my dad, and I knew I could. I knew what I could get away with. And sometimes I would push a little bit too far, and he would say, "Who do you think you are?" And that was the time to run, So I had no respect for my dad. My mum, when things were going good, then, there was harmony, but there just wasn't that many moments like that in life, So I really hated my dad. I felt like he held the key to happiness in his hand, but he had buried it somewhere, never to be found again. So the only solution I seen as I got older was for my mum to leave him, because there was no happiness in that home. And my mum I thought she was the sweetest, kindest woman ever, I seen her as my saviour from my dad, the only one that could bring happiness in such an unhappy home. Without her around, there was no joy, there was no sense of peace, everything was tense all the time. The only time I truly was at peace with my dad around was when other people were around, like strangers, or there was a big party going on, because my dad was a different person when other people were around. And depression started probably after my parents got divorced, and I wouldn't say that I took their divorce hard. It was something that I thought would be better off for my mum and all of my siblings, but I got depression. So the biggest crisis in my life for me was, it started at a very young age. I don't recall exactly, but I was probably about 8 or 9, and I seen a movie once and it made me think that I might be gay. I was really tortured by the thought that I would wake up in the middle of the night crying about it, because I didn't want to be. And my mum would come in and she would ask me what was wrong, and I would tell her, that I'm scared that I might be gay when I get older. And she would comfort me and she would say, it's okay, we will love you anyway, it doesn't matter. And I remember sometimes she would also say, it's okay, you won't be, it's fine. It was comforting enough that I could go back to sleep, but I didn't believe it, this went on for I don't know how long, maybe months, and then it just got to a point where it was always there, but I suppressed it, I didn't wake up crying anymore, but I was still tortured by these thoughts that were there.
I think we all recognize, to a degree, identity, but we don't recognize how powerful it is and what role that it has in our lives. When we make decisions, when we do things, when we say things, when we respond to things, we do so because we have already evaluated information. The information has come to us, whether it's through visual information, auditory information, smell, through our senses. We begin to evaluate information according to identity. Who am I? Right? And from that, now, reason is going to evaluate cause and effect. Heart is going to evaluate gain and loss. Conscience is going to evaluate right and wrong. Intellect is going to evaluate worldview and information, truth and error, and so on. And then you finally have a conclusion where you make the choice or the decision in the will. But the very beginning of that is identity. And there are only two possibilities for identity. Either I am a creator or I am a creation. So why is this important? Well, let's look at the effects in the life of an individual who, one, believes that they're a creator, and two, believes that they're a creature. One, they believe that they're a God, and two, believe that they're a child of God.
I went on a cruise when I was 21, and there was a girl on the cruise who was gay, and she was very confident. And I thought, well, if she's this confident and okay with who she is, then maybe I can be comfortable with this identity as well. And I always thought that it tortured me so much and I struggled so much with it because it must be true as well. I thought I was just denying who I was. So I accepted it and I come out to my family, but coming out, the words just felt so strange on my lips. I still was not confident or comfortable to say the words. It come out and I did not feel any better, any more liberated or any more comfortable with the thought that I was gay. And that was at 21.
The great error in humanity is a case of mistaken identity, believing that the life that I have is mine. The body that I have is mine. The things that I have are mine. My time is mine. My talents are mine. With that worldview, with that identity that I'm God, essentially, it'll change my reaction to my needs. How are those needs met? Where am I going to get those needs met? And that fundamental error of mistaken identity, I think, is the key to the woe and disease and heartache and bitterness and depression, all the trials and afflictions that humanity struggles with really comes from that issue of a mistaken identity.
I was 28 when I finally come into an understanding of my true identity and the truth. And all that time, so for all of those years, it was something I never was comfortable with. So I had this huge identity issue in my life. The only time that I can truly say that I was just at peace in myself was when I was partying and doing drugs, that I felt liberated and a bit more at ease just in my own skin. And it's sad that it took that self-destruction for me to actually feel at peace. It's interesting that I took this lie, believed it could be possible, but hated it. It's crazy to think, and I don't understand. I really don't understand why. I still wanted the attention from males. It's interesting. But at the same time, it's like I didn't know how to relate to males, It was an interesting push-pull dynamic, It's like I wanted to know that I was desired and desirable, but then once I had it, it's like, okay, I am, but I don't actually want you, I had this great identity crisis, I really wanted that depth of connection with people, and I felt like that I could only get that at a certain point in my life, as time progressed. I felt like I could only get that when I was partying and when I was high. So I started to go out with my friends that would go to the pub on a Friday night, which became Friday and Saturday night, which became Friday, Saturday and Sunday night. It went from drinking alcohol and maybe just doing a little bit of drugs to drugs was the thing, and then alcohol was secondary to that, and it went from cheaper drugs to more expensive drugs. And I was just living for the weekend in the end, I worked just to pay for my lifestyle, and the weekends partying, that was my new purpose. I started to deal marijuana. I had a big social network, but it led to chest infections, which I would smoke through the chest infections because this was my purpose for living, this drug. It gave me purpose, and I wasn't ready to stop, even though the doctors told me I had scarring on my lungs.
For example, I would visit people in their homes and they would have multiple health issues. And one of the few things that would bring them joy would be what they ate or what they were addicted to. One of the ladies I was visiting, in her home, she had severe COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Her lungs were not functioning well. She was on oxygen, she was on multiple inhalers, and she was still smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And I asked her, why do you still smoke? You see that your lungs are struggling, that you're struggling to get air. Why do you continue to do this? And she said, it's the only thing that brings me joy.
I knew that I was killing myself, and I knew that, at any point I could overdose on these things. You hear about it, and I could be here one day, gone the next. And I remember thinking, how can I do that to my family? My mum especially. I thought it would break my mum if I was to die doing this. I created an identity for myself, when I took the drugs. What was inside of me that I was afraid to say and to do when I was sober, when I took drugs, it's like it took away that fear. So when the drugs stopped, because I knew I was killing myself and I wanted to stop so badly, I lost who I was. So all my morals that I thought I had and who I thought I was went out the window. And so I hated that life and I didn't want to be that person, but I was.
When it comes to our nature, our fallen human nature, it's like we have grown up in a prison. And as a prisoner in a prison, you have access to captive choices, and in the prison, you don't have access to free choices.
I wasn't taught about the nature that I am born with and the needs that I have, and because I didn't understand I understood my physical needs, but I didn't truly understand my spiritual needs, I didn't understand how to get to the cause of the problem.
When it comes to addictions, what does that look like? Often we think that somebody gets into addictions because of the choices that they make. And I don't want to give the impression that choices aren't involved. Yes, choices are involved, but the question is, does somebody get into addiction because they're free, and from freedom, they jumped into addictions? Or did they get into the manifestation of addictions because they were already captive, and now the captivity is manifesting itself? And I would propose to you that it's the captivity manifesting itself when a child eventually starts participating in an addictive substance or behavior or other things of that nature. In the prison, I have no choice to not be addicted to something. I might not give in to this addiction right now, but when I don't give in to it right now, I do so with the wrong motive. Which the wrong motive with the right choice is wrong, and the wrong motive with the wrong choice is wrong. It's still the prison.
I created so many different identities for myself that looked good for a time, I guess. I mean, I was very, very successful, I suppose you could say, or very, very ambitious with my health and fitness, and I went for that 110%, and I looked good, and I lived that lifestyle like picture perfect. But the problem with going 110%, when you crash, you just go in the opposite direction, because it didn't give me the fulfillment that I was looking for. I gained that adoration of people. People were like, oh, what do you do? Like, what can I do to be fit and healthy? But I mean, I might have had it for 3-4 months, and because it really didn't fulfill the need like it seemingly did on the outside, it would lead me into partying and drugs, trying to search for that connection and acceptance and fulfillment that I was looking for.
Our fallen nature has no capacity to not be addicted. It is always addicted to something, but it can change what it's addicted to. So some people are addicted to TV and movies. Some people are addicted to video gaming. Some people are addicted to food. Some people are addicted to shopping. Some people are addicted to pornography and sex. And some people are addicted to gambling and alcohol and tobacco and drugs and so on and so forth. And it's a whole list of things that individuals can be addicted to. And what do you see? Like if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, which I have been to a number of times, you might have somebody there and they're getting their 3-year chip. They haven't had anything to drink for 3 years, but they're smoking a cigarette outside, and they come inside and they pour a big a big cup of coffee, and so they're drinking their coffee through the meeting, they're smoking cigarettes outside, and they're congratulating because they haven't had a drink of alcohol for 3 years. Well, it's not that the individual is not addicted anymore, it's just they're not using one particular substance right now. Sinful nature will come and it will be addicted. It's always addicted. It just can switch from what it's addicted to something else. It cannot come to the point where it's not addicted.
You may have focused so far in your behaviors and tried to force yourself to abstain from doing this, or force yourself to replace the wrong behavior by another better behavior. Why is this not useful?
Forcing oneself to fight against the addiction is just not working. I had my 20 years of experience, but I had my patients as experience who tried hard. I had a good friend that I knew from youth times who struggled very much with pornography, and he could not overcome it. And addictions come to help us to see the error in the heart. But since we don't know that the addictions is the result of the error in the heart, we fight the effect. And fighting it, we will never succeed. Or if we succeed, we just replace it with another addiction, which also does not satisfy our spiritual need.
I just wanted to run away, to get away from it. I thought that the influences around me were the problem, and if I could just get away from it, that it would be the solution. I moved away. I moved about 40 minutes away from home where I lived, where I grew up, and I started gambling to fulfill my need. So I had a good job, and I was saving to buy a house, and I had plenty of money to blow, so I started to do that. And it's so boring. You sit in a room playing a poker machine, pressing a button. There's all these stimulating noises and lights around you, and people smoking cigarettes, and we're just a bunch of people who are just seeking for fulfillment, trying to find it in a game where you put so much into it, expecting some great high, and most of the time you walk out disappointed. And running away wasn't a solution either. I tried to journal and self-reflect and meditate and change lifestyle habits and not buy junk food, and try and create a routine for myself that I would have structure and stability, and all the advice that anyone could give to me, I had done, I had fulfilled, and I had failed, and I'd done that over and over and over again. And so it wasn't really a solution. There was no solution, it seemed. So where to turn and who to ask, I had no option. I was desperate.
When you have an addict who understands that they're addicted, then they want to be free. And how does an addict try to be free? Typically by making better choices, by not choosing to do that thing again, by choosing to do something different, by changing the environment, and so on. And all of those are dealing with the external factors. Those are all dealing with the effects. They're not dealing with the cause. So simply by choice, an individual who is caught in addiction cannot save themselves from addiction. It's just like the prisoner that's in prison. The prisoner in prison cannot get themselves out of prison by simply choosing to get out of prison. That's the nature of being a prisoner. So there has to be something else that is outside of them that has the power that they don't have, that they can turn to and they can rely upon, and then they can cooperate with.
So the point of searching for something different came when the other pursuits, it wasn't an option to go back to those. They didn't work. And I'd had a friend 5 years prior to starting to search for God and seek for who he was, you know, what's in the Bible, you know, came, 5 years after my friend told me that everything going on in the world was in Bible prophecy. And it was super interesting to me, you know. She told me about prophecy, and I never forgot, you know. So whenever I was in a hotel room, which wasn't a whole lot, but I would look for a Bible and just read a verse or two, you know, and put it back down. In 2022, for a couple of weeks, I'd been thinking about picking up the Bible, and I thought, you know, I might start reading the Bible. And one day my mum said to me, I'm going to start reading the Bible. And I was like, oh, me too. And so we both got a Bible off my aunt who became a Christian 3 years prior. And I used to avoid her like the plague, you know, because I didn't know that I had a need of God, of this God you tell me of, you know. I thought I was a good person. My aunt was trying to tell me it's not enough for you to be a good person. And I mean, when you don't see that you have a need and someone tells you this, it's like, who do you think you are, you know? And that's where our journey began. Before becoming a Christian, I had a very good job. I'd bought a house. I had everything I could have wanted. And a month into owning my home, I remember thinking, is this it? You know, that happiness after a month had fallen away, and by the world's standard, I'd made it. I was 28 years old. One night I was at work, and I was looking around. I worked in a big heavy metal industry, and it was night, it was dark, and so there's not many people around. And I remember just looking around and thinking, is this it? Am I going to just work here for the next 40 years and then retire, and what? Like, is this all there is to life? To me, as soon as I had accepted God, that lifestyle I knew was behind me. And I remember I lived in the city, so the nightclubs were pretty much right on my doorstep. So on a Friday, Saturday night, I could hear the music playing. And I remember walking around the city and just thinking, you know, what is my life going to look like now, you know? But I gave up the drugs and the alcohol, but I just went on another pursuit and just used Christianity in the same way as I did use the drugs and alcohol and, you know, and the gym and healthy eating and all of those things. I still just had an outward way of doing it, and it didn't work. So it was very early on in my Christian walk that I ended up worse off than when I was in the world, because now I claimed that I believed in a God that could help me to overcome anything, and yet the food addiction became my greatest struggle, you know, because, I mean, food's acceptable as a Christian, drugs and alcohol are not. It was very challenging because I couldn't stop. I knew that it was super excessive, and I was putting on weight very quickly, unhealthily. My heart would beat so fast sometimes because I'd eaten so much. And I would wake up with pins and needles in my arm, you know, and I was only 28 years old. And I knew that I was on the door of diabetes or something, you know, but I just couldn't stop. And yeah, so this cycle of health and fitness, partying, and then binge eating, I seemed to repeat over 3 times in my life and then fall into a great depression. I had this war going on in my soul, and no earthly support could help me, you know. My mum was better than any counsellor I could go to, you know, and I had gone to counsellors, and I knew that wasn't a solution, that wasn't the help I needed, you know, just getting a better routine and, you know, the advice that they give you was just, you know, getting to bed on time and these sorts of things and going through your past, and it didn't help.
And when I see the captivity and that I'm in the prison, now I have a choice. Now I have a choice by the grace of God. Now I can go, oh, here I am in prison. Okay, God, I can't get free from this prison right now. I need you. I need that gift, that pardon, right? The life of Christ, the nature of Christ, his power, and so on. And I know that it's offered to me right now because it's always offered to me. And so, Lord, thank you. I accept it as my own. And now by faith, I have access to free choices outside of the prison. When in my humanity now, I only have access to captive choices. So in the process of going free, when I accept the grace of God as my own, when I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, now I have access to free choices, but I still have an old nature that has access to captive choices. And now the real battle begins. And by falling and getting back up, and falling down and getting back up, and falling down and getting back up like a child that's learning how to walk.
The fulfillment that coming into the church gave me was, I guess, a community of people that were searching for something greater that was outside of partying and these things.
Every addiction has the same cause. Everyone, it doesn't matter what the addiction is, has the same cause. Just like a lack of food produces hunger and a lack of water produces thirst, so a lack of love produces a discomfort associated with it.
So every addiction comes because of this need that we have of love, but we think we can fulfill it by the appetite, by sexuality, or by other means that are physical and not spiritual. The more a man is or a woman is in this emptiness, the heavier the addictions become.
Smoking marijuana may bring you relief for a certain time of the anxiety that you're feeling for a certain situation. And because it will bring you relief for a short time, you can easily be confused that this is the solution for the problem.
Now the discomfort associated with the lack of love is covered up temporarily. And so there's a relief of that discomfort, and I like discomfort being relieved. And now there's the incentive to go back again later and have that discomfort relieved, and now you set up the addiction cycle. But the very beginning of that addiction cycle is always a lack of love. And it doesn't matter what the addiction turns into, what substance or what behavior, if that lack of love is not supplied, if it's not filled, the individual is going to continue to turn to other different things in order to supply that lack.
Before I come to understand this, when I had problems with food addiction, I would just try to relocate or go to a health retreat. I was just trying to hide my bank card, and my money away. I was just trying to solve all the things from an external perspective. And with this new understanding, I realized that the food wasn't the problem and my circumstances were not the problem, and it wasn't a problem of having too much money and too much access to these things. The problem was I had a need for love and that I was trying to fulfill it with these things. And only God can fulfill those needs. So I can see in all my relationships that I manipulate for love. I try and be the person that I think they need, Try and be really supportive and really helpful in this area. And it shows on the days where, they might not be around and I have no motivation to do those things. And it's like, so what is my motivation? Am I doing this because I want to serve, or am I doing it just because I want them to love me? I want to be accepted by everyone, and I will try and be who I think they want me to be. And if I don't see them as worthy, then I don't need to talk to that person. But if they're someone who I feel like is someone and I want to be accepted by, then I'll try and be exactly who I think they want me to be. So the greatest impact that the truth has had on my life is that I have a need for love that only God can fulfill. And it's not something that I can get from people or things, but it's something that I take from God, you know, and that I give to others.
How can we solve it? I tried 20 years to fight against addiction because I thought there is a choice not to do it anymore. But there was none there.
Understanding that I was created by God, that I was loved by God, it wasn't something that I was willing to walk away from.
And that's why God is vital. That's why His power and the grace of God is absolutely necessary in the context of addiction.
I knew that there was no going back to my old life, and that there was something here, you know, and I was searching for it. I really wanted peace. I really wanted liberation. I really wanted happiness.
So how does an individual go about that transformation? Well, first, again, we must recognize in the addiction, we're not addicted because we want to be addicted. We're addicted because we can't help it, right? We're not addicted because we have chosen our way into it. We're addicted because we have a nature that naturally is addicted that then directs or controls our choices, right? And so that becomes a big part of the problem that we're dealing with. Right. And so now you have an individual that is stuck in the addiction. You need the grace of God. You need the nature of Christ. You need the transformation that comes always and only through God and His power to set us free. And you recognize that I can't do this on my own. I can't just choose my way out of the problem, but God has given to me a choice. I can turn to Him and I can connect with Him. I can turn to Him and I can take from Him what I need. He's always available. He loves me. He cares for me. And when I recognize that love, or the lack of love, I should say, is the foundation of an addiction, then I can recognize that when I'm tempted towards the addiction, that is the sign that I am running empty on love. Okay, I need to fill up. I need to turn to God and I need to fill up. Because instead of the urge or the desire for the addiction being something that draws you away from God, now it becomes something to remind you to run to God and to connect and to take from Him. And when you figure that out, it's transformative.
There is one solution, and it is getting back to that connection with God, you know. If we expect those needs to be fulfilled from others, we are always going to be left thirsty and hungry and wanting more. But if we go to the true source of love, we will never thirst again. It's a daily battle, you know. I see as these challenges continue to pop up for me and I consider others the problem, you know, and it's impossible, I know that there's something still in my heart that needs to be crucified. So it's not something that is one and done. It's a daily walk. And as I'm in this process of depending on God and making Him my best friend, the more my love for Him grows, the greater my understanding of His character grows, and it's beautiful, you know. That's the greatest challenge, is identifying the cause. I can see from the effects in my life now when something is wrong, but sometimes working it out is very challenging. Other times it's quicker, but some things take more time. Like clockwork, I'll end up with dermatitis on my hands, and I think back to the events of the day and what's happened, and I see that my issue with how others behave is my issue, and the only way that I can have peace, no matter how others act, is if I solve my own issue with not being okay with them not being okay. I've expected from them something that only God can give, and, it goes away, very quickly once I realise. And the constipation that I've had since a child, and which still pops up now and again now, every time it's because I have conflict with my mum. We have some challenges in our relationship at the moment, and my mum's always been on my side, and I want her to agree with me, and I want her to be on the same page. I mean, if God fulfills all my needs, then I don't need anything from my mum. I just need to give her what I've taken from God, But when I have these expectations on my mum, my bowel movements, they stop. My relationship with my dad, it has changed. I was never yelled at by my dad. I was always seen as the favourite by my other siblings of my dad. So I've never really had problems too directly with my father. And I still see where problems come up with expectations with my dad, where, I judge him, but by reason I know that he has no choice to behave the way that he does, because he expects the impossibility from his relationships, and it's still challenging for me because he still has conflicts with my siblings, often, very often, where they're in and out of each other's lives because they can't tolerate one another because of their expectations on one another. I want to love everyone, from the homeless person who nobody looks twice at to the person who, has the fancy cars and everybody seems to love, that you're more drawn to. I want to have the same love across the field for everyone, because, I don't need validation from anyone.
Your value is not determined by your parents. Your value is not determined by your siblings. Your value is not determined by your children. Your value is not determined by anybody around you and what they think of you and how much value they think that they have. If that was the case, forget it. If you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. If you don't know who you are, you don't know where you belong. You're always searching, always searching, always searching. And the Maker has defined who you are. He said, "Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God." You are a child of God. You are His precious one. Well, you don't deserve Him, but it's not all about deserving. It's about grace. You are worth the price that God paid for you. When you begin to accept that you are of great value, then something begins to change. You can't treat yourself like you did before. You can't think of yourself as you had before. You can't participate in the same things that you did before and in the same way, because you are valuable, tremendously valuable. And God understands how much you are valuable. For God so loved you that He gave His only begotten Son, that if you believe in Him, you should not perish, but have everlasting life. And He wants to show us, remind us, restore us to that value. And in the context of that value, he can and he will set us free, so that the past does not continue to control our future. You are a child of God. You are unique. Nothing and no one can take your place. You are priceless. In Christ, you get to develop forever. And he is priceless. And he is worth giving up everything else so that you can have him. And that is what every addict is looking for.